Hey, how you doing? Welcome to the Talk podcast, brought to you by Wilmington University. Wilm U Works. Danny Pommells here as we are trying to navigate this NBA trade deadline. Amy Fadool, we're bringing in the big guns, big game Amy, Air Amy, dunking from the free throw
That's
line.
right.
So
You
glad
know
you
it.
could join us.
I'm happy to be. Big day, a lot going on in the NBA world. A little bit going on with the Sixers, but a lot going on elsewhere. Certainly in the East and in the West. There, Danny P.
Yeah, our producer been very in the cut as always. Noah Levick, busy typing away somewhere, trying to wrap his arms around this NBA trade deadline. But we will delve into exactly what is happening with the rest of the elite teams in the Eastern Conference, as well as what the heck is going on with the 76ers falling to these teams who are missing multiple starters in their lineups. But of course, the most pertinent news is we have to say goodbye to Matisse Thybulle, the Sixers, sending him to Portland in a three-way trade with the Charlotte Hornets, where the Sixers received Jalen McDaniels, as well as two second-round picks, one in 2024 and one in 2029. Jalen McDaniels, a 6'9", San Diego State Aztec, will be a unrestricted free agent next season, and athletic wing. I'm sure he's going to get paid, guy his size who can do a few things. Amy, are you surprised they didn't get more from Matisse Thybulle, a guy who has been theoretically on the trading block for multiple seasons?
The Hornets were asking for quite a bit. There was a couple of reports out there. The Spurs were one of the teams that were interested in Jalen McDaniels, and a lot of people might get him confused with his brother Jaden McDaniels, who is on the Timberwolves. But Jalen McDaniels had a couple of suitors, and supposedly the Hornets were looking for a first-round pick. So the value was really high. And I think in return, I mean, we all know what the Hornets are doing. They're a team that's in the full-on tank. I don't think they're going to win the Wembanyama sweepstakes, but they're certainly going to get in there and try. But I think that this is about what I thought they were going to get. Actually, I'm pretty impressed that they were able to get a quality player. Now, it is an expiring contract. Obviously, he's done, as you mentioned, he's an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. So that's probably why it didn't warrant maybe more from on either side. But no, I mean, this is a really nice player. Jalen McDaniels is having a career year, and I know people are going to look at his numbers and think, oh, gosh, only like 10.5 points, and he shoots below league average from three. Well, last year he shot actually right above league average from three, so I think that's maybe a little bit of a misnomer, but I thought it was a pretty good return. Matisse Thybulle had kind of taken a bit of a step back the last probably, I would say 10, 12 games. He's only had maybe one or two that were kind of quintessential Matisse Thybulle as far as creating the steals and picking the pockets and getting those fast breaks kind of going with his defense. Offensively, we know what he is. He hasn't been anything else than that. And he's actually had a tendency on the defensive end to foul recently. So I think that this is about what I thought they were going to get. They get a nice player in return, and obviously it had to be a three-way team deal to kind of make it all work.
Amy, of course, more in the know than many people out there. She, of course, is the host of Sixers pre- and post-game live each and every Sixers game, which I neglected to mention, but a Jill of all trades because she does a little bit of everything if you haven't noticed. But you bring up an interesting point with Matisse Thybulle because the offense never quite got to where people expected. He's supposed to be a 3-and-D guy. It was a lot more D than 3, but the dude made 2 all-NBA defensive teams. So as far as the bell curve of what he provided for the team, heavy on the defense, not so much on the offense. But I think there should be a brief moment here where we give him a little bit of his flowers, Amy, because he broke a long streak of just nasty draft picks and, unsure circumstances with injuries. And, of course, Embiid worked out for the 76ers, but Nerlens Noel didn't, Jahlil Okafor didn't, Zaire Smith didn't. We could go on and on. Go ahead. Who are you about to say?
Markelle Fultz didn't. Ben Simmons didn't.
Ben Simmons, you know what I'm saying? So for all that Matisse was, he has that big, mural painted of him outside a garage on Front and Girard. And, some people may lament the fact that he was lauded that way, but I remember there was a point where before Maxey got here that Matisse was so popular. I mean, I'm talking about, I remember there was a time where he was signing autographs uh, by the Love sign downtown, and he caught a limo there. And there was video on social media, people running after the limo like he was Michael Jackson after the like autograph signing or the appearance or whatever. So Matisse, and it was warranted because he was a breath of fresh air. He brought, the defensive prowess, as I mentioned, and he was so likable and down to earth and easygoing. Even my daughter caught him in Rittenhouse Square and asked him for a photo because he, was kind of like a shutterbug or whatever you call those. Like he likes to take pictures, as we know. And he stopped, took a picture with her. It just he brought a breath of fresh air to the franchise as a draft pick that worked out, that they drafted and paid dividends. So he deserves a little bit of prowess, pat on the back, adoration.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that the only disappointment, and it could be a bigger one for some folks, and not as big for others, but the big thing is his offense never developed. And I think there is some hope within the Trailblazers organization that they can get that offense developed. And if it does, there's going to be a lot of people that will lament that it never developed here. And was it something in the Sixers organization or whatever? But that's a big if. We saw him for 5 years be the exact same player. And when you draft him as that, that's fine. He was never that 3-and-D player, as you mentioned. He was just the D player. And he is it's a very good niche. And it's a niche that is important for teams looking for depth off the bench, for guys that provide that instant defense, certainly in the playoffs where defense is much more valuable, I think, than in the regular season. So he had a very good run here. And you're right, he was very well liked. I know in my mentions when I just tweeted this out, hey, it looks like this is getting done. There was the first 4 or 5 were like, I can't believe it. I'm so bummed. He was very well liked. He was very well received here, and I think he really took to the city and they took to him. So there's going to be that disappointment. I think that Jalen McDaniels, though, will fill a lot of the question marks that people have about this team. And I know we're going to talk about that coming up, that he can help them. Right? Were they going to forget about Matisse Thybulle? No, they're not going to forget about Matisse Thybulle. I mean, he went to the Matisse exhibit at the art museum, walking around. I mean, it was very meta. That's the kind of stuff that he does. He walked around he had like photography seminars. He would invite people to walk around the city and take pictures with him and photographs.
And his YouTube channel during the bubble just took off.
He just is that guy. So I think that he was who he was, and I don't mean to say that to be flip, but we can't expect more. You can't look back on him in any other way than exactly who he was. He was a defensive player who every now and again would knock down a 3, and that was about it. And it was good for what they had him for, but really, let's think about what this team is aiming for. They want to win a title. They want to get past the second round, Danny, and they need guys to do that. They need a depth on the wing. They got it. They probably also need a stretch 5 as a backup, but that's for another day.
Well, Jalen McDaniels, let's dive right into it. What does he bring to this team? Because they lose some of their defensive acumen with Matisse leaving. Although, and I'm like biting my tongue a bit because he wasn't a great, like you said, he had been fouling recently. He wasn't like excelling in like, guarding the other team's best player necessarily, or some of his perimeter defense had been lacking. But you trade him for a guy that's 4 inches taller, is going to crash the boards. The Sixers are bottom 5 in offensive rebounding in the NBA. They need help on the boards. This guy crashes the boards. He has size. It'll be interesting to see how he works into the lineup. But what are you seeing with Jalen McDaniels that you feel like he brings to the squad?
He brings in athleticism. There's one thing that this team kind of lacks at times, and it's exposed when they go against really athletic teams, and it's some overall athleticism. Obviously, they've got supreme talent. They've got good shooters. They've got guys that are some of the best basketball players. James Harden should be an all-star, and obviously Joel Embiid is an all-star. But the athleticism sometimes isn't as evident, and it's the style of basketball that they play. Tyrese Maxey's out there with that second unit, and he can certainly provide that spark. I think Jalen McDaniels has an opportunity to do that, get that pace going a little bit higher. He's obviously going to be coming in with the second unit. You mentioned crashing the boards. If anybody out there, and I know it was a hot name to Google right around 1:30 today. But you're going to see a lot of high flying, a lot of putback dunks, a lot of setups. Like that was one thing that we saw from Matisse when he was playing in the Olympics that we thought was going to translate over. A lot of cuts to the basket with easy dunks. And you're thinking, well, that's something Matisse can do because he is athletic. He is a long, rangy player. And it just didn't translate, whether it was the style that the Sixers played or he just wasn't going to do that. You saw sparks of it. It just wasn't consistent. I think Jalen McDaniels can do that. I mentioned his three-point shooting, and I only want to mention it because glaring out is 32%. He is getting a lot more usage this year, so the number has fallen from 38% last year. But he is a better shooter than what maybe his stats currently say. But he's averaging over 10.5 points, and I think he's a guy that is right around that rim a lot. And I don't mean that in the fact that he's a low post player, but he's a guy that can make those cuts to the rim, give this team a little bit more athleticism on the wing. And defensively, he's not at the same level a Matisse Thybulle has been, but he's certainly in the same stratosphere, we'll call it. He's in the same, area. He can play on the same court defensively. He is not a liability on the defensive end. And that's one thing the second unit has really struggled with. Besides Matisse, who has been struggling, there isn't a lot of defense. Montrezl Harrell, though known for his offense, is not a defensive player. Tyrese Maxey, though a great offensive player, is not the greatest defender that you're going to see out there. So I think that he will provide a good two-way player, steady hand. And you mentioned his size, Danny. I mean, he's very long, very rangy, and I just think he can be that guy in that second unit that can score and also get those rebounds. I mean, you mentioned it. Bottom 4 when you're looking at offensive rebounds, and how many games the last 2 or 3 that we've seen them get absolutely killed on the offensive glass to the point where that is the sole reason or one of the main reasons they are lost that game or have been down in those games. So I think that you saw that. I don't think this is a reaction, this trade, to anything that happened in the last 2 games, though those are glaring, and I think that it certainly exposed a few things. But I think this was an overall, this is going to be the one move that's going to make our team better. They weren't going to just make a move for sake of making a move. And I do want to point out, there's going to be if you guys have been following like we have, there's some big names that are going to be probably out there on the buyout waived market. I think you're going to see a bunch of names that just don't fit with the teams, but they had to be part of the trade, to make the trade work. So look for some names there. I don't know if there's going to be a backup center out there, but there could be some more depth at the guard position, at the wing position, certainly at the forward position on that waived/trade, wave/buyout. So I'll be interested to see what happens. I think there's going to be a couple players out there, but I like Jaden McDaniels. I think that Jalen McDaniels is a player that can really help the Sixers in that second unit, which had been good, but you can always get better. Jimmy Lynam likes to say you need guys at the end of the bench, aim. Well, this is a good guy to have it. He's not at the end of the bench. He's probably, second or third off the bench, if I had to guess.
And honestly, both Matisse and Jalen McDaniels are like quintessential prime candidates for the change of scenery kind of upgrade. Matisse being in a new atmosphere, like you mentioned the Olympics a little while ago, he excels so much there. Maybe it was the change of scenery, a new voice, more camaraderie in whatever ways, or Portland obviously isn't a great team, but just point being that his opportunities and how he's used can be different and maybe give him more confidence. He obviously went to University of Washington. Portland's not far from there. So maybe just being back on the West Coast might give him more familiarity closer to home or what have you. And same thing for McDaniels. You mentioned his usage rate. When you're used more and get time, sometimes you get more opportunity, but you're also it exacerbates your weaknesses too. So here he'll be more of a specialist and have like finite time and opportunities where he's on the floor with a certain group and can be leaned on and depended on, and that in ways that kind of play more to his skill set, so that maybe here and a change of scenery for him can be really good. But we're going to move on to our next topic, but it's important for us to mention that if you are ready to build career skills in 2023, apply to Wilmington University today and get started by March 6th. Learn more and apply at wilmu.edu. Upskill, reskill, or start fresh in 2023 with a degree or certificate from Wilmington University. WilMU works for you. Apply today to start March 6th. And of course, we go to Rivers Casino every other week, and it's time to rush to new rewards at Rivers Casino. Now there's a whole new way for you to earn, redeem, and level up your rewards. Get your new Rush Rewards card and get more out of your game at Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Hey, back here live on the Sixers Talk podcast with Amy Fadool and Air Amy around 1 a.m. last night. Things kind of went absolutely haywire in the NBA as the alert came down from Shams Charania that Kevin Durant had been traded to Phoenix. And that in and of itself would have blown your mind, but it comes on the heels of Kyrie Irving being sent to Dallas. And he's left the Brooklyn Nets and acclimated himself to Dallas so quickly that he played last night and was able to comment on Durant being shipped to Phoenix and Irving saying that he's happy that Durant got out of there. And what is going on in Brooklyn, Amy? I mean, they send Durant to Phoenix. Kyrie's gone. They traded Harden last year. This this triumvirate, they played less than like 30 games. Ben Simmons, right? You feel me? Like Ben Simmons is the last man standing in Brooklyn. Where were you when you found out? Did you wake up this morning to find out about the Durant thing, or how did that play out for you?
I had just fallen asleep and I had forgotten to turn my phone on silent. So of course I have my alerts set like any responsible person that doesn't need sleep. And I heard bloop, and I look over and I'm like, oh, what is that? I thought maybe it was the baby monitor or something. It was not. It was the tweet that announced that, and I couldn't. I had to stare at it, thinking because you were just I had just fallen asleep, so I was like, maybe I'm not reading this correctly. So I kind of rubbed the sleep out of my eyes and I look at it again. I'm like, yo, this is what. The Nets are an absolute dumpster fire. We knew that beforehand. We knew with that whole Kyrie thing going on, like in the 2020, 2021, even a little bit into 2022, like, whoa, that's a complete disaster. And then Ben Simmons arrives there and they're like, yeah, Ben Simmons, he's going to turn into this player. And we're all shouting from Philadelphia, no, he's not. But good luck, everyone. We know, we experienced it. We saw it for 5 years and it never happened. So good luck. So we just, kind of threw a couple of, briquettes on that fire and watched it burn. But when Kyrie got out and there was the reports of like, oh, Kevin Durant's met with managers. They both asked for trades this offseason. Think about that. The three guys that they all wanted to have this new three, all three asked for trades in the last year and all have gotten them. All three players that they coveted, created this super team with, Kyrie, James Harden, Kevin Durant. We're back together. We're going for the East. They all requested trades within the last 15 months or 12 months and have all received trades. I mean, I don't know of an organization, like we can badmouth some of the organizations that are doing whatever, the Houston Rockets and whatever they're doing with the John Wall thing, whatever else. And there's some poorly run organizations, I'm sure, out there. But whatever is going on with the Nets, I mean, it's mind-blowing to think they went from an East contender to they're a punchline. And I feel bad, honestly, for Mikal Bridges because he's a nice player. He's a player that should probably still be here in Philadelphia when he was where he was drafted. Especially after he saw Josh Hart get traded to the Knicks with Jalen Brunson. He's thinking, well, why can't? And now he's headed to Brooklyn. So he's in New York, just not at the right team probably for him. But he obviously becomes their best player. And that's not a slight at him in any way, shape, or form. But that's just the state of the Nets organization right now. They fired their coach because they wanted to please their players. They shipped out James Harden because that's what they needed to do. Then they wanted to appease Kyrie and KD, so they fired Steve Nash. And then look what's happened. Everybody's gone. I mean, if I'm their ownership and their front office, I have to just, I'm the meme of Will Smith standing in the empty room wondering what happened? Where did everybody go? And why am I left holding the bag? I mean, it's an unmitigated disaster.
I
unmitigated.
see a 30 for 30 coming. I really do. Like
Doesn't even need to be that long. It's like a 10 for 10.
it's like I mean, Brooklyn in and of itself, it just seemed like such a vogue, hip and like, progressive,
With
it
our
just
flannel.
seemed
No.
like it just it's
Nope.
just hard to digest that and understand what's going on. But funny thing about it, like you said, is Josh Hart gets shipped from Portland to New York. Jalen Brunson finds out about it while he's at Villanova getting his jersey retired and has this incredible reaction. And then this Durant thing goes down, and at least Mikal Bridges is close to home. He can see his mom, who works for the Sixers organization. Last time I checked, so I mean, he's not that far away. He can go to Phillies games. He's a big Phillies fan, so he can check them out for sure. But um, putting the Nets aside, the other contenders in the Eastern Conference, the Milwaukee Bucks, as well as the Boston Celtics, you know, oddly enough, um, you know, Jay Crowder ends up in Milwaukee after he gets sent to Brooklyn as part of the Kevin Durant trade, and then ends up, going to Milwaukee. So they, like you said about Brooklyn, they have no qualms about making the other teams in the conference better necessarily as they, swing a deal with the Milwaukee Bucks to make them better. Um, and then Mike Muscala, a shooting stretch big man, comes over. A guy, Sixers fans know well, comes over from OKC to play for the Boston Celtics on the heels of Jaylen Brown, who knows how long he'll be out. He has a facial fracture in the win over the Sixers from some friendly fire from Jason Tatum's elbow. So while they're figuring that out, they still swing a trade for Mike Muscala. So are the Sixers keeping up with these teams? Do they need to do more to be as good as the Celtics and the Bucks, or do you feel like they're right there and that it'll all play out like it does?
Any elation that people saw that Kevin Durant was, no longer in the East. Because let's face it, no matter what disaster the Nets were, they still have obviously one of the best players to ever play in the game when Kevin Durant was there. When then he was gone, you're like, oh, they don't have to worry about the Nets. I don't think they had to worry about the Nets really that much anyway, but it's always a nice thing. But then you thought the Mike Muscala thing is the most interesting to me because he is a nice
Also,
player. He's a player that I think that helps them more than people might believe. You mentioned his size, but and that he shoots the three. I mean, that's a dangerous combination, and that's like that's a problem for a lot of teams when you have those big guys that can go out there and roam because then you're taking everybody out of position.
and
So
almost 40% from three this season.
exactly, he's a very good. It's remarkable for a guy 6'11" to shoot what he does, and he creates a little bit more space for the Celtics, who can get a little bit jammed up. We know obviously what they've got. Al Horford is who he is. Offensively, he's not Mike Muscala, and I don't mean that in any way, shape, to say that they're even comparable, but Al Horford doesn't shoot the three. He's the role player, and he's very good at that role. He's a very good defender. We know how well he's defended Joel over the years. You mentioned Jaylen Brown, obviously taking the elbow from Jason Tatum last night. That's a problem for them. But it wasn't a problem last night because they didn't have anybody, and they still thumped the Sixers. They outscored them from the perimeter by 9-3, 27 points from beyond the arc. And they just added a guy who shoots almost 40% from three. So for me, that's a little bit of an issue. When you look around, did the Sixers get better? I always check that off as like when I look at the trade deadline. Did the Sixers get better? I think they did get better. But did everybody else in the East get better that they should be worrying about? That's a problem. There are some teams that did make some nice moves. You mentioned the Bucks as well. Jay Crowder is an excellent defender. He's a guy that plays certain roles, and he's very good at those roles. You need to have those guys. And I know the Sixers went out and got those guys. PJ Tucker is absolutely that guy for them. And he's been as advertised in that role. I wanted them to bubble wrap him and just unwrap him in April, though, because he is that valuable. When you talk about, we mentioned earlier about how Matisse Thybulle hasn't really been that lockdown defender on some of the better players. PJ Tucker has. You saw him against Kevin Durant. You've seen him against Giannis. He's been very good. And so that is why I worry about if you have too many options, there's only one PJ Tucker out there, and he's an older fella, and he can only play so many minutes, Danny.
And PJ Tucker, Amy, a guy the Sixers lost a second round pick for because of tampering, where all these second round picks are flying all over the NBA for compensation
There
to
must have
get
been
guys.
185 second round picks fly off the shelves today. And that might not be an exact number, but it might be close. It's definitely like close to 100. It feels like every
So that
deal you read about was 4 second round picks, second round pick in 2085, second round pick in 3022. It's
so it
amazing.
makes you think maybe they could have sweetened the deal in getting Jalen McDaniels if they had the two picks they lost because of trying to
Never
tampering with Daniel
know.
House and PJ
You
Tucker.
never
So
know.
it is one of those things Sixers fans can stew over because they tend to always never leave any stone unturned when it comes to the pain that they might be feeling because of some mistake or something like that. But
That's just how it goes. I mean, we wouldn't be Philadelphia fans if we didn't constantly overanalyze every past move, every draft pick that should have been here. I mean, every time we see Jason Tatum, people think oh, he could have been a six. That was never going to happen. They knew that they were taking Markel Fultz. That's why they made the deal. But it is fun to think about who could have been. But, Mikal Bridges actually was here. That was a player who was here. So I get when people lament that. When I saw his name, when he was in that trade, people are like, well, he should have been a six. That's factual. So there is a little bit of, truth when you think about those extra picks when you get punished for tampering and doing things like that, they are assets, as Sam Hinkie so coveted all those years ago.
hey, as always, we want to remind you that if you're injured for over 70 years, Lundy Law has been the number one personal injury law firm in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Their services are exemplary, their results are exceptional. Call 1-800 Lundy Law to get the money you deserve. Opioid addiction is a national public health crisis. The Someone You Know podcast from the Independence Blue Cross Foundation offers inspiring stories that challenge stigma, offer hope, and humanizes the disease of addiction. Download the new season 3 of Someone You Know on all major podcast platforms. Amy, the Sixers are trying to get better. They weren't better last night when they faced the Boston Celtics, who were down Robert Williams, Marcus Smart, Al Horford, and then lost Jaylen Brown to a broken face
Bad
for
game
the
from
entire
Jason Tatum.
and a bad game from Jason Tatum.
Mm-hmm.
On the heels of losing to the Knicks, who were down Mitchell Robinson and RJ Barrett. What's going on? How are they? I mean, Jalen McDaniels ain't going to fix all that. How are they going to get themselves back to where they should be, and not just for themselves' sake, but for the fact that they have maybe the toughest schedule in the NBA here with these remaining, 29 or so games. What's going on? What do you see? Of course, as you mentioned, it was a 3-point shot last night, but with the team, the lack of effort, you could go back to the Orlando game last week, another game where they didn't have the effort, didn't have the intensity or the athleticism and desire to win. What are you saying with the team?
Listen, I think that there's a couple of things going on right now. It is always a tough time of year, and I hate to put it on that, but that has to play a little bit of a factor when you're this close to not just the trade deadline, but the All-Star break. The season drags a little bit. This is kind of like that, when you're in school and it's not quite June, but it's that May time, and you're just like, I just want to be done with school, but you have a whole month left. It's a little bit of that, but I think that the problem that I had is that it is effort, but it's also about dictating your game. That Knicks game, the Knicks want to play at a certain pace, and after the first quarter, the Knicks dictated the pace, and that is not what the Sixers wanted. They don't want to have that kind of. They were trying to play the same. They passed the ball like 85 times each possession, and that's not what they do. They weren't crisp passes. They were just doing too much, and it wasn't. It's a very good Knicks defense. They had obviously that's what Tibbs is known for is his defense, but they were missing so many parts, and you're just thinking like, why? At some point, you just need to rise up and just put tighten your bootstraps and like go to work, and they just didn't. So you thought, all right, that was an anomaly, and then you saw the way they came up against the Celtics, and there was a couple plays that were very emblematic of what the effort level was of that game. There was a play in the fourth quarter where they were only down, I think, 4 or 5, and it was point 0.5 seconds left, and they seal Joel, and they have this alley-oop basically right with point 0.5 seconds left to go, and they make the bucket, an uncontested layup because there was no backside, no weak side help at all. It was mind-blowing, and we're on set, and Jim's like, what did I just witness? Like that can't happen. It can't happen. I don't know if that is just a mental lapse, but there was a couple things like that. There was a lot of recognition where you're looking at, there was a play where Joel Embiid was being guarded by Peyton Pritchard. Sorry, Peyton Pritchard, but I like my chances with Joel on that one. And he passed the ball out of it. And so are we too mindful of making that extra pass, or you just barrel your way through? I mean, Joel Embiid still had 28 points, so it's hard to knock him, and James Harden had 26, but there was a real drop-off. I mean, let's face it, guys like Derek White and Blake Griffin outscored Tobias Harris and Tyrese Maxey combined. Blake Griffin had some comments after the game like, oh, that's been their game plan. That's everybody's game plan. You're going to leave Blake Griffin alone for 3. I'm sorry, you just are. The man people didn't even know he was on that Celtics team. They had no idea until they saw him in the starting lineup. People were like, wait a minute, he's there? I'm like, yep, he's not in Brooklyn. He's not in Detroit. You had no idea where he was, and now he's the starter for the Celtics. And he made his first 3 threes. You're going to leave that guy open. But the problem is there was no adjustment. Like, it happens. All right, he made 3 threes. Maybe kind of cheat a man over there every now and again. So it was interesting to me that they had a couple of those plays after the Knicks game, that there wasn't any kind of recognition, whether it's at halftime. And listen, I know the coaches yell and do whatever at halftime, but there needed to be a lot more adjustment. And you can put that on the coaches, and you can also put it on the players, because at some point you have to look around each other. And when the guys are like, raising their hands up after another 3 goes in, or a bad rotation, and you have Derek White wide open for 3, or Blake Griffin, at some point, don't you have to look inside yourself and be like, yep, that's probably my guy, or I'm probably going to need to address that. So it'll be interesting to see. They have the Knicks, obviously, again tomorrow. They're coming here. You mentioned Jalen Brunson earlier, everybody. All the Knicks were at the Villanova game to watch his jersey retirement, so they'll be all fired up. And they'll be fired up because they just beat the same Sixers team on their court. And they think that they know what they can do to beat them. And they've got another tape to look at as far as what the Celtics did against them. But, I mean, if you're not beating these teams who are shorthanded, it seems like, and I don't know if it's just me watching, and that's my thought, but when they have teams with full complement, they take them a little bit more seriously. There's that thought out there, like, there's no way they're going to beat the Nets, who have Kyrie and Kevin Durant, and they don't have James Harden when they go out and beat them. You're thinking, well, that's odd. And then they're not going to beat the Bucks with Giannis, and they do. And then they can't beat the Celtics, who are missing 4 of their players. I mean, and Jason Tatum had an off night. I mean, he obviously did okay in the end, but through 3.5 quarters, he was not Jason Tatum. So it was interesting to me. 2 games isn't cause for a big alarm, but it was, I guess, against the teams that they needed to beat. We made so much of that great West Coast road trip, 5-0, and then the 8 games on the road. But there was only really one quality caliber opponent out west, and that was the Kings, and they did beat them, and that was a really good win. But it is problematic when you can't beat the teams in the East. Who cares if you beat the teams in the West? You don't face them unless you get to the NBA Finals. So I was more concerned than maybe Jim and Mark were. But I'm more of a fan. Those guys have certainly watched more basketball and played more basketball than I've ever even thought about playing and being around. But I was a little bit concerned. I think there is a little bit of cause for concern. I hope that it's just kind of the doldrums of the season, and that the All-Star break is around the corner, and they're just trying to get through these last games. But you're losing ground. You made up so much ground. You were in second, and then now you see it slipping away. It's disappointing to me. It kind of erases some of the good feelings that we felt after that, a 5-0 road trip and the 8-game road winning streak for me.
Yeah, and I was so concerned about them falling into that 4-5 matchup with the Cavaliers, but that 4-5 matchup, if the Cavs reach the 3 spot, that 4-5 matchup might be what the Sixers need if they end up playing Brooklyn or like the Pacers or the Heat or something like that. I think that, it's going to be tough matchups everywhere. But you made some great points, Amy. And it's like, the other teams in the conference are getting better. and the Sixers are showing some warts in areas that you probably thought that they had overcome. Um, I tell you, that was like a knife straight to the heart when Blake Griffin said that Doc Rivers can't make the adjustments. I was like, ooh, that came from a serious place of like disdain.
Yeah, he knows him. They've
Yeah.
coached. I mean, let's face it. He's been around Doc for a really long time. So he's like, oh, he's always done that against me. I get it. Like, listen, you're gonna leave Blake Griffin open. He's 175 years old and he's going to make a wide open three. You just don't do it the entire night. Like at some point, you make an adjustment and someone says, maybe put a body on Blake or at least lean towards going. I mean, look, watch the tape again. These are wide open, as Jim Lynam calls them, horse shots because you know they're going in and you're playing them in horse. That's what those are. And he made all of them. He and Grant Williams buried them from three. Buried them. They were both 3 for 5.
And they bring another guy in, Mike Muscala, who can stretch the floor and bring Joel away from the basket so that he's not in great rebounding position. He can't guard the rim if they can swing it quick enough and things like that. So now you make some great points, and hopefully, you know, the adjustments will come, hopefully, as the season goes on and Doc kind of has his team. Like, this is what the team's going to be. So hopefully he can be rise to the occasion a bit, but we'll see Friday when things play out. Pregame at 6:30, correct?
Correct. We'll see you.
All right, 6:30. Sixers pregame live. Amy Fadool, Jim Lynam, and Mark Jackson. Be sure to check it out. We appreciate you tuning in to the Sixers Talk podcast, brought to you by Wilmington University. Wilmu Works. This has been our trade deadline special. Make peace with saying goodbye to Matisse Thybulle. We won't see him as much if he's playing for Portland, but he was a great interview and always very thoughtful, and a guy that we appreciated his time here. So good luck to Matisse. Welcome to Jalen McDaniels, and we'll see how he fits in with the team. Take care. We'll see you next time.